Hello, everyone. Welcome to IT Tech Talk. I'm your host, Joel Ward, and with me today is Sagi. Sagi co-founded Webair in 1998 and is now the CTO at Opti9. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Joel.
Good. It's an honor. It's an honor. So tell me a little bit about Opti9 and Webair. First, let's start off with Webair. You co-founded that in 1998. What is Webair and what got you into co-founding a company in 1998?
Sure. So Webair actually turned into Opti9
Okay.
about 2 years ago. But the way Webair started was I met who would become the CEO of Webair in '98. We were both working at an internet company, and I was a tech guy, and I was going to college at the time. And the CEO, his name was Mike. He really kind of saw the writing on the wall on the market changing with the .com and a need. It was sort of the Wild West, and people, his friends, our friends, were looking to start websites. And back then, hosting was there was maybe 3 or 4 hosting companies, and so he started hosting and designing sites for his friends, and after some convincing, he asked me to join him, and quit college, and we kind of just rode the .com wave in a positive way. And eventually we sort of found our place in the market, and we kind of pivoted towards enterprise customers and providing really managed hybrid cloud services and really customized bespoke offerings around management of private cloud and networking and AWS. And then a huge business around backup and disaster recovery. We sold that business to a private equity firm about 2 years ago. So because it was doing so well that we really sort of wanted to take it to the next level. And then we merged with another company and turned into Opti9. And today we're really doing essentially the same thing, but on a larger scale. And we support many other platforms. We support security offerings. We support multiple clouds. We're in additional regions, and just happy to see it grow and be able, every time I think there's no more runway or we've done everything we can do in the industry, technology keeps evolving.
Okay. Well, that's, you were talking about the .com thing. So 1998, that was when Amazon kind of got its wings and grew. So you were along with the ride with a lot of these major tech companies today.
Yeah, I mean, they all kind of have, most of them had pretty modest roots, and I remember when we first started running Apache as a web server with FreeBSD. And at the time, Yahoo was probably the biggest site, much more important than it is today, I would say. And, I felt a level of comfort using it because they were using it and they were pushing the project. And, certainly back then, Amazon was just an online bookstore. But obviously a lot of the .coms failed, but as we're seeing probably in crypto, you kind of have to go through some reshuffling, and some bets work out and some don't.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's like I look at it like I was 8 years old then, so I wasn't even old enough to know about that, or investing or putting money into those portfolios that grew substantially for some people, But like it sounds like what you guys did took off, and you ended up having a successful thing. And you just said you just sold that company, and now you have Opti9 is your new company, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I stayed on as a CTO. And now we're a much bigger organization. We're about 150 people. And, it's interesting because you mentioned Amazon, and at some point, Amazon Web Services, AWS, obviously came into the marketplace, and a lot of hosting companies were like, okay, well, wow, that's going to be the future. That's cloud. Like, what about us? And I think there was this huge shift. And that was the case. I think we had an identity crisis. I think a lot of companies went out of business because of that. And then we saw kind of the pendulum swing back a little bit, and it wasn't about what cloud are you going to go all in with or what's your cloud strategy. It was what hedging our bet. These workloads work well in this cloud, and these other use cases work better in that cloud. And for this, I'm going to put it on a private cloud. And so we started getting back business, and now our story is kind of like having the workload's best interest at heart. putting it in the right spot based upon its own unique requirements for latency or security or perpetuality. And one of the things that I realized throughout that identity crisis was that I think our value proposition in the marketplace is, we are providing managed services, which is a term that is just as vague as the term cloud. Everybody says they do managed services, right? And so part of what I'm working on right now is actually trying to articulate through our customer portals and our interfaces, what does that mean? What can you hold us accountable to? What can you expect from us? What are the SLAs? How do the RACI matrix change dynamically? And I think that's where our value is, right? It's the wrapper of managing, monitoring, securing, and scaling around infrastructure. And as long as we can keep pace with the infrastructure, if it's public cloud or Kubernetes or Outpost or Azure Stack, as long as we can keep pace with the new technology, there will be a place and a need for these managed service providers, especially as things become more complicated and organizations just don't have the capability to manage them.
So I see here it says hybrid cloud. For those of my listeners that don't know what hybrid cloud means, could you explain what a hybrid cloud is in the definition?
Yeah, I mean, so I was listening before, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, people would come out and say, we're going all in with Amazon, or we're going all in with Microsoft Azure. That's our strategy. And then, as I said before, sometimes, you do that and then you realize, Amazon's a great home for 60% of my workloads, but the other 40% are just not the right fit. So then they say, well, maybe I need more than one cloud. Or maybe the public cloud is not even the right home for specific use cases. For instance, we have some what are they called? Law enforcement customers, and they're like, we can't use the cloud. We don't want our evidence to cross state lines. It needs to be in the state, so therefore we can't use cloud. It's like, well, you know what? Hey, we have facilities in the state. We can run private connectivity. We can provide you sovereignty with the cloud. So hybrid cloud just means, it's like a hedge. It just means that we are going to have a strategy of not using only one platform. We are going to have a strategy, like, more important, like it's less about what cloud we're going to use and more about how do we build a reference architecture for our security and our network, so that if and when we want to use multiple clouds or platforms, we can. How do we allow ourselves that flexibility, but can still hold ourselves true to our own security frameworks and our network integrations?
Yeah. So AWS and Azure have become a very big public, thing, and everybody's either one way or another, and I've seen my dad's company went with AWS to host their platforms and stuff that they're doing with their app and development and stuff, but like, when it comes to using AWS and is the portal, and even Azure, is the portal and the availability and the ease of use, is it there? Is it? That's why I ask you: is it easy to use all these, or is it better to use your system?
Well, that's a good question. The answer to that is, it's a great question. It really depends on what you have an appetite to take ownership for. AWS and Azure and the other hyperscalers, it's like walking into Home Depot. They have all of the tools you need to build, and all the tools and materials you need to build amazing things. But you are responsible to piece them all together and make sure they work well and secure them and all that other stuff. And for many companies, that's perfect. That's great. They have these very large app dev teams or infrastructure teams, and that's exactly what they need to build scalable businesses like Netflix. Other companies, and this is what every company should do: sit down and figure out what do you have an appetite to take responsibility for? Do you want to be responsible and accountable for your cybersecurity? Do you want to be responsible to ensure that your backups are running properly or that your disaster recovery works? Some, like I said, for many big companies, sure, no problem. And for others, they're like, no, we want our IT teams focused on adding value to the business. And so that's what it comes down to. So there's no right or wrong. It really depends on the persona of the organization. But what we do is we simplify it. We will take ownership of all that. We will translate your human requirements into SLAs. You're going to hold us accountable to a service level and to resilience and uptime instead of just infrastructure.
So let's talk about cost analysis then. Is it more beneficial, like for companies to do that SLA route than it would be to go with AWS and pay for their own cybersecurity? Uh, I mean, let's be real here. Like, would companies rather pay for their own cybersecurity, or would they rather have that knowledge of having, I have a whole dev team and stuff, or not dev team, but like a whole team behind me with SLAs and ready to go for me on a moment's notice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you were to go and hire just for that specific use case, then it's not going to be worth it for you. You're going to be paying more, and just maintaining that that level of expertise is even just difficult today in the marketplace. But if you're a big organization and you already have people that are in the business of managing security and the business of managing resilience, and this is just another platform for them, and maybe you're not necessarily hiring another head, then that's probably going to be the better route, is to keep it in house. I think in general, at a certain scale, it's always better to do it yourself. You are taking on more liability and ownership, but I think for most organizations, if you're even a few hundred customers, or a few hundred employees, it's probably better to outsource. And then we even see very large organizations sometimes outsource because of strictly the responsibility factor. We want you guys to be in charge of our disaster recovery because we don't want to be responsible for it. It's too important. Or I've talked to CIOs of hospitals that say, I don't want any servers on-prem anymore. I don't want to be the one on the hook if something bad happens. In fact, now we see with the government that they, with the CEO of Drizzly and the CISO of Uber, they're being personally penalized for, security failings at the organization. So it's not about just protecting your customers and your employees anymore. Now it's sort of about protecting yourself as an IT, leader.
So let's talk about locations. It says here you've got a couple different locations. Do you have data centers? Is that what you kind of have as like a small mini data centers that you host, or is it basically just you're the MSP, you manage all this stuff?
I think it's so depending on the regions, it can be sort of one or the other. We do own and operate some of our own physical data centers,
Okay.
and we also do use our own bare metal and our own equipment and our own equipment in third-party facilities and our own network.
Okay.
And a lot of it just comes down to the use case and the location, and types of customers that we're serving there. Lots of the other countries that we're in globally, we ended up there because we have large organizations that are looking for us to own their global services, but maintain sovereignty into different countries, with GDPR or just general data sovereignty.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about the bare metal thing you were just talking about. I want to know more about that. So when you say you operate your own bare metal stuff, does that mean you create your own server boxes to put in these data centers to run your software?
Yeah, that runs our cloud. I mean, and that's all completely it's all completely transparent to the customer, right? They don't have to worry about the CPUs and the memory or all that. But we basically run virtualization. We run a lot of VMware.
Okay.
Many of the other technologies that we utilize are automatically integrated with it. Like for instance, if you look at offsite backups or offsite disaster recovery, that's a service that we sell where for our customers that are already running their own infrastructure on premises or at a co-location or another cloud, we can replicate from their production and we can keep offsite backups. We can provide them with a disaster recovery environment automatically, an isolated recovery environment, and we build it in a way that they can use it if they get hit with ransomware. We actually look at what's going on at their site too from the data mover and the backup software, and we can actually detect in some scenarios, ransomware that's about to happen based on people in there trying to potentially delete backups or change retention settings, all sorts of interesting things.
Okay. So within that, how many people do that? How many people are on call managing that? Like, is it a 24-hour thing? You take shifts, or is it an on-call basis whenever a client calls and says, "Hey, my server's down," or "I have a ransomware attack"? How does that work? How does that system work when you have to go through all that stuff?
Well, we are 24/7, and we're just, in our industry, you have to be,
Yeah.
and we are 24/7. We have been for, gosh, probably close to 20 years.
Okay.
All of our technicians that are picking up the phones and the chats are all based in the United States. We have some customers that are like defense contractors, with export control regulations, stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, there's, I don't know, 60, 70, sort of technical folks who are in charge of that. And you mentioned if someone calls up and says their websites down or whatever, I mean, we are monitoring for all that proactively too. So ideally, we know about that before they do, and we handle it and just let them know. But we do that from running customers' production infrastructure. People that say, I don't want to even own the hardware. I just want a third party to be accountable for it, and I'll just work on app dev. Or if it's the AWS environment, or if it's the backup or DR.
Okay. What is your current uptime keeping like, as let's talk about numbers. What's your current uptime like as far as keeping centers open and live all the time? Have you been able to keep the numbers up and minimize downtime for servers and services?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think I don't have the numbers in front of me, but 5.9s, 99.999% is what's in our contracts with our customers, and
Okay.
don't maintain that, then we're issuing credits, and we are maintaining that. We haven't given out credits as far as I know for any of that, and kind of like it's sort of like table stakes in this industry. You need to do that in order to. If you don't do that, obviously you're not going to stay in business very long. But also, to the extent that that's important to customers, and the devil's in the detail, right? Typically, when people quote that 5.9s number, it's typically an asterisk, right? That's a network uptime. That's not going to speak to the applications. That's not going to speak to, third party. Like, let's say your application only functions if Salesforce is working,
Okay.
Salesforce goes down, I can't help you with that, So a lot
That's
of what
yeah, because that's Salesforce's problem.
right. And a lot of, but see, this funny thing is there's so many gotchas in this industry. You start talking about security and tax. It's like, well, I thought I was protected because, I pay someone for security, or I moved my email to Office 365. I thought the Microsoft must be giving me backups, it's the
Right.
cloud, and there's just so many gotchas. And so I'd say part of what we try to do is educate customers about all the bad assumptions in regards to the cloud.
So let's go into your role as a CTO at Opti9. It says here you're responsible for product development and research and development, and you have extensive experience in all those aspects. So talk a little bit more. What do you do in your role? So you manage all the different tools and techniques to help grow Opti9?
I wouldn't say I manage all the tools or the techniques. I think what we have people that are kind of, I used to do a lot of that myself, but now we have people that are way smarter than me who
Okay.
kind of, are figuring out the how, what we need to do. I think where I'm trying to add value is, there's a lot of noise in the marketplace. And for a company like ours, there's so many different directions that we can go. And sometimes it's very difficult to kind of, weed out the noise from what we think is going to be something that sticks and something that's legitimate, and trying to understand to what extent can we add value to something like that. Is there a place, are people having challenges around those technologies? I'll give you an example. We've talked about hybrid cloud before. If you're using one cloud, there's nothing wrong with that. Compare using one cloud to using three clouds. I mean, the more platforms you use, and not just clouds, but clouds and SaaS platforms, those platforms are all different components of your critical production environment. You're making your environment more complex, right? And so I think one of the important parts of IT and where we can add value as a managed provider is helping customers maintain simplicity. One of the goals of IT these days should be to keep things as simple as possible. The more complex, the harder it is to monitor and manage them and make sure they're secure and resilient. So how do you balance simplicity with being able to use all these awesome, cool features and platforms that are out there? That's, I think, where the challenge is, and that's where we're trying to add value for our customers.
Okay. Let's jump back to the 90s when you first started Webair, and you were working, you're going to school and stuff. What made you really get into the tech industry? What was that? I know your buddy, he got you into that, but what made you want to jump into that? What was enticing about the tech industry for you, especially back in the 90s when it was really kind of just getting started?
Yeah, so I was always interested in tech. Going back, computers, right? Like doing like PC gaming. I was lucky that when I was 13, I got a compact computer, and
Okay.
they happened to have a really good warranty at the time. And so I just had I just had this desire to like mess with it and open it up and, replace the memory or upgrade the CPU or put in a bigger hard drive. And Undoubtedly I would break it and short the motherboard or whatever, and they were really good. They'd send me a replacement, and so being able to learn and practice and fail on their dime, that was fun. I enjoyed it. And then when the internet started getting popular, services like AOL or Prodigy, obviously I jumped on that, and bulletin boards. And then, one thing led to another, started using Linux and FreeBSD, and got involved in open source and, all that world in programming. And I just really, really enjoyed it. And when my future business partner approached me, like, I was going to college, I was going for computer science, and
Mm-hmm.
it was fine. Actually, I was working, I was working at an ISP with them, and I was in charge of all the servers there. And there was probably 100 or so servers there, but I was not, they weren't mine. Like, there was
Yeah.
one or two other technical people, and I was, sort of like the lower man of the totem pole. And then when my future partner approached me to create something, to build something, he gave me an opportunity, like, hey, this is going to be yours technically.
Yeah.
You will own all this. You'll be responsible for all this. The buck stops with you. And that was really exciting to me, to having access to everything and making the hard decisions. And in my mind, it was like second in command for 100 servers, or like 2 servers all to myself. And I
Yeah.
just like that. It just seemed exciting to build it from the ground up and have to make all the decisions.
That's cool. So it's kind of funny because back in the 90s, I told you I was 8 in 1998. It was, when I was 10, 11, I started, getting more into computers because my uncle was a big, and he got Microsoft certified and stuff. And he was one of my favorite uncles. And he got me into computers, and like you, I used to rip them apart. And actually, he would tear them apart, show me, and then he would teach me what parts went where. And I think that's what got my love of computers. And ever since then, I've worked in the IT industry. I've done my own IT. I have my own IT business. I actually have, and on the other side of this wall, a server rack with a bunch of Dell Power Edges that
Mm-hmm.
run my entire like podcasting, like,
Mm-hmm.
backups and stuff. And it's kind of funny. It's like years ago, my dad always told me, he's like, oh, computers, it's so expensive to have this, that. And there is expensive. Like, I buy refurbished Power Edges because I can't afford the new ones. They're really expensive. It's just like computers. Like, I buy new computers, like, this Surface behind me and my computer that I use for podcasting. But when I go to spend on something, I go all out. Like, and I remember, back when I was doing this, messing around with Windows 98 and all these old parts. I remember I was able to just piece and put pieces together from other computers. Like, I had all these Dells and compacts and stuff, and just ripped them apart all the time. And I remember that, back then the pricing of things were so much easier. It felt like with certain like things were so more expensive, like hard drives. I'm sure you can attest this. Hard drives were so expensive when you wanted to go upgrade like to a higher speed. And now like a terabyte, you can get a terabyte for almost $100 and something dollars. And watching the tech industry grow over the last 30 something, or maybe even 20 years, watching it grow, it has been a phenomenal leap, because I'm big in the tech industry. I like watching it grow. I like watching new tech come out, and I purchase a good majority of it. But like, watching someone who built something, back in the .com era is pretty fascinating to me, because it's like, see all these big companies that started out alongside yours. It's just fascinating to see that you have grown into Opti9, and you're still doing what you love today. It's good to see that someone, as they did as a kid, now is still doing it as an adult, in the industry. So I think that's really cool that you're still managing and handling tech. Do you I think a side question off that is, do you still like tinker in your spare time, like mess around with the new hardware, make gaming computers or stuff on the side?
I don't,
Okay.
but to your point, what I'm really doing now is, I'm building solutions,
Hmm.
for the company, and we're creating some really cool things. And I still get just as excited when we get an idea about something. Like, we
Hmm.
launched this security offering about 6 months ago, and the integration was beautiful. We didn't have to release any agents. We were able to take something we were already doing, and we found like another use case for it. And
Okay.
like, from a technical, some people say, like, coding is like poetry, right? Like, from a
Yeah.
technical perspective, those things really excite me. So my tinkering sort of need is still being met, at my job, and I'm enjoying it. And I love to go and evangelize those things and get the word out and find interesting integrations. But to your point, back in the 90s, there was no Google. There was no
Mhm.
tech support number you would call. There was no, you had to be really resourceful. And if you needed to want something really bad to get it done. In fact, not that I'm proud of it, but I remember when I would get stuck with things that I couldn't figure out, I'd have to go onto like a chat room for like whatever open source software and change my name to like some girl's name, and that was the only way that people would like help me figure something out. And I think today techs, sometimes you have people you have hardcore engineers that are out there.
Yep.
And that's great. They don't want help from anybody else. That's not a good thing. And then you have people that rely too much on third party tech support and don't even try to fix things themselves.
Yeah.
And you got to find the balance, and you do need to, being resourceful is a skill that you can get trained on. Being a good troubleshooter is a skill. Being a good technical writer. I think sometimes people forget about the soft skills. The tech stuff's great, but these are things that will always be important too.
Yeah. So can I ask you an off the wall question about tech real quick? So there's a company called Framework. I don't know if you've ever heard of Framework.
No.
Okay. Framework is a computer company that's basically trying to do the whole like right to repair thing. So they have this laptop and you can take it apart, you can tinker with it. It's easy to tinker, it's easy to take apart, it's easy to, mess around with, and some laptop companies, like I know my Surface, like if I take that sticker off to get
Yeah.
to get to the screws, you're voiding every warranty and you will
Yep.
not get it fixed. So if I were to put a new S hard drive in that by myself, which I know how to do, I've seen the video, I void the warranty, whereas this company is trying to revolutionize where that's going and the right to repair and taking things apart. What is your stance on like tinkering in general now that people are saying, oh, you can't tinker with our product because if you tinker with it, it voids our warranty? How does that feel to you? Because it's like, back in the day, I've done it too, tear apart computers and you had a compact warranty, they replaced it. Now it's very hard to seem like they don't want to give you those parts. They don't want to give you the ability to do that. They don't want to let you tinker anymore. How does that make you feel when you can't touch or tinker or learn?
Yeah. I think that people have to recognize that not everybody learned the same way. For me, it
Mhm.
was not sitting in school. It was getting my hands on something and breaking it. And that's how I would learn, is by figuring out how to fix it or whatever. And I think that there's, what you're saying, there's a lot of truth. And I just pulled up the website as you're talking. I think
Yeah.
that's a great concept. I mean, by the way, and when I would call Compaq, for warranty, obviously they'd ask me if I touched it, and my first answer would be no, right? And so
Yeah.
going back to being resourceful, that's a skill that never goes away. But I think it's a fair question. I can see both sides of it. But I think for me, what shows up with this is you really need to understand as a consumer what the responsibility of the vendor is. If the vendor is making a commitment to me to fix this piece of hardware, for the next 3 years, as long as I
Mhm.
don't open it up, that's an assurance for me. I'm going to respect that. I'm okay
Yeah.
with that. I do think Framework looks great if you want to tinker. I mean, I'm not going to go buy a MacBook if I want to tinker, right? Like with
Right.
hardware. And then the other thing is, I think people don't, I think again, going back to the whole cloud and assumptions, people don't, they make bad assumptions. You go buy an IoT device like a thermostat for your house. You might just assume that like, oh, I don't have to tinker. The company is going to make sure that it's running the latest firmware and it's secure and it's not
Yeah.
hackable. Is that the truth? I've seen so many scenarios over the years where someone pays a designer to create a website and then 2 years later it gets hacked. And it's like, is it the designer's fault? No, you paid him to create it, not to maintain it. Is it the hosting company's fault? No, it's an app problem. It's your fault, not for not fixing it, but for not knowing what you are responsible for and what to hold the vendors accountable for.
Yep.
I think that's the best thing that consumers need to do, is just ask questions.
Yeah. I think that was perfectly answered. That's exactly what kind of answer I was looking for. So thank you for answering. Sagi, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such an honor. I've really had a fun interviewing you. For those listening to the show, all the information, his bio, his links to the Opti9 will be available on the website. The website is constantly changing. For those who have been on it, we're appreciating the web traffic. We're just talking about websites, and I'm talking about the website. We've been seeing a flux in traffic. We just had so many new people use the guest intake form. So for those who listen who are signed up as guests, thank you so much for signing up and for using our intake form and using the website And it's been such a great experience getting all the information from the contacts we've been getting and the messages and the responses to the new website. For those interested in checking out, it's at www.ittechtalkpodcast.com. You can view the resources like sponsorships. You can view the episodes, all the videos we have from the show currently. Some of them older episodes are not on there. We are still working to edit them. But yes, there's a lot of different opportunities to check out different things. Again, Sagi, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.